Jaya Srimad Nārāyaṇa. Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna. Jaya Shri Guru. Sanatana Dharma Jayate. Dharma-rāśtra Jayate. Victory to Sanatana Dharma. Evam bhavatu. May it be so. Namaste, everyone. It is absolutely wonderful to be here with you again this week for our weekly live stream and ISDS satsangha. As always, or I should say as usually the case, as is often the case, today I'll be giving a talk on a verse from the Vedic scriptures that will be followed by questions and answers. So please, as always, wait until my talk is over and I'll signal when it's time for you to begin asking questions if you feel so inclined. And before we actually begin, just very quickly, I just want to say just a few words. First of all, again, as always, thank you all very much for being here. It is always my pleasure to do these live stream satsanghas with you. We've been doing this for roughly 6 months, give or take. Approximately 6 months or so since the entire COVID crisis seriously began to be taken seriously by people. And this is something that has been a true privilege for me personally. You know, as people know, my talks tend to be live. In other words, an actual audience in front of me who I can see, who I can touch if I needed to, etc. And that's how I have done the vast majority of my talks all throughout my life. And this is something that is still very different for me, not being able to see my actual audience. But it's something that we in the International Sanatana Dharma Society that we do as a service for people, because we know that, again, with all the various crises that have been happening in the world, especially America, but really throughout the world for the last several months, there are many people out there, literally throughout the world, in so many different nations, who just feel very much alone, who feel very fearful, who feel very much disconnected from the world around them and from spiritual fellowship from other devotees, etc. So the reason why we do this is indeed as a service to all of you, individuals who are followers of Sanatana Dharma, or certainly who have a sincere interest in Sanatana Dharma. So it's truly my pleasure to do this. Just a few things I want to say. First of all, as I mentioned the last time, the International Sanatana Dharma Society is in the midst of its year-end fundraising drive. And this is something that every single nonprofit organization in certainly America, if not the world, does. And that is once a year you have a fundraising drive. It's how you pay the bills. It's how you can continue with whatever projects the specific organization in question is working on. Well, in our particular case, indeed, we began this really in the first maybe week or maybe the second week of November. And this fundraising drive is going to be going on until the very end of this year, until December 31st. And if you are in a position to do so, please feel free to follow the link that you'll see in the comments section. And please give a donation if you can, and only if you can. You know, Sanatana Dharma, at least authentically practiced the way we practice Sanatana Dharma, is not donation or money based in any way whatsoever. Indeed, just as an aside, this is one way that you know a fake let's say, spiritual teacher or organization versus something that's real. Every spiritual teacher upon the face of the earth needs donations. There's no way around that. The difference is this, that someone who is fake will only help you if you give donations. So thus you basically have to pay for advice, etc. An authentic spiritual teacher, on the other hand, will help you regardless of whether you give donations. And if you do give donations, it's very much appreciated. But your approaching that individual, asking questions, etc., is not based upon what money you give. So this is how we operate. What I do, I give freely to the world, regardless of anything. But despite that, indeed, we need donations because we have a movement. So again, not to belabor the point, but if you feel so inclined, please help us during this time when we're having our year-end fundraiser especially. And I truly appreciate it, as do all of the members of the ISDS. With that having been said, let us now dive deep into this beautiful verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam. People have noticed that I tend to comment on verses from the Srimad Bhagavatam quite a bit. Not exclusively. I also comment on verses from all the Vedic scriptures, actually, and have from Upanishads, Mahabharata, Bhagavad Gita, etc. Many other scriptures, some of which are even somewhat obscure to the mind of even a lot of followers of Sanatana Dharma. They may not have heard of even some of the scriptures that I comment on. Well, this very specifically is from the Srimad Bhagavatam, and this is the 6th canto, chapter 1, verse 41. If you wish to follow along, as always, please look in the description of this video, and the verse is there, the translation of the verse, and it is Prabhupada's translation. It's not my translation. And I will first read this and then comment upon it. And this is how this verse proceeds. The supreme cause of all causes, Nārāyaṇa, is situated in his own abode in the spiritual world. But, nevertheless, he controls the entire cosmic manifestation according to the 3 modes of material nature, sattva-guṇa, rajo-guṇa, and tamo-guṇa. In this way, all living entities are awarded different qualities, different names, such as brāhmaṇa, kṣatriya, vaiśya, etc. Different duties according to the varṇāśrama institution and different forms. Thus, Nārāyaṇa is the cause of the entire cosmic manifestation. So beautiful, beautiful verse, very, very nice verse, interesting verse, in that what this verse is explaining are several things, actually. In fact, so much so that we won't even have time to go through all of it. But the main gist of the verse, the main purpose of this verse, is to explain very specifically what is the relationship between God and God's creation. That's the main gist of this verse. Now, with that understanding, let's dive into this verse a little bit, beginning with the very first sentence. In fact, the first clause of the first sentence. The supreme cause of all causes. Let's stop there. Let's stop there. First of all, this is one of the designations of God. You see, there is a philosophical principle known as sufficient causality. You can feel free to look this up. Sufficient causality is the philosophical principle that states that for every effect in the universe, there is necessarily a cause to that effect. So thus we see this even empirically. When we look at the world around us, what do we see? Cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect. And even though with any given effect, we may not necessarily be able to discern what is the direct cause of that effect, we know inferentially that there is a cause nonetheless. There is nothing in this world that is an effect that does not have a cause. And more, very often there is a chain of causality. There is a chain of causality in such a way that you have an effect that has a cause. But then that cause, in turn, is really an effect of another cause. And that cause is an effect of another cause. And going on and on and on, stretching back for however long. So thus we indeed live in a world of causality, of cause and effect. Well, very nicely, this is one of the definitions of God. that God is the supreme cause of all causes. In other words, if we were to somehow perceptually, if we somehow had the omniscient ability, let's say, to discern, to see all of the various causes and effects and all of those chains of causality, if we could envision this in our mind's eye, an infinite number of such chains of causality, well, according to this, there is ultimately one supreme cause of all other causes. So thus, every other cause will come to an end. Every other cause will have a starting point. However, when it comes to what is the cause of causality itself, of the very fact of the phenomenon of cause and effect, that is God. God is that cause that is the supreme cause, that is the origin of all other causes, and more. And this is not stated in this verse, but it's stated in other very clear verses throughout the Vedic scriptures. More than this, God is not merely the ultimate cause, not merely the supreme cause, but he is also that cause which in turn has no cause. So thus, he is indeed the original cause, the Adi Purusha, the original person, the original cause of all things. So this little definition of God is something which, if we were to contemplate it, if we were to truly think about this philosophically, it reveals philosophically, metaphysically, cosmologically, it reveals quite a bit about the nature of God. That's of great importance. But now more, and again, this is Prabhupada's translation, this is not mine, that supreme cause is not just some impersonal power. It's not just some impersonal principle. It's not just some thing. It's not just some unknowable. But rather, it's personalized. So the supreme cause of all causes, Nārāyaṇa. Now, when you look at the Sanskrit for this verse, Nārāyaṇa is not mentioned. However, if you look at the previous verse, that is verse 40 versus this verse, which is 41, Nārāyaṇa, that the name is indeed mentioned very specifically, and this is a continuation of the previous verse, of verse 40. So this is how we know that it is Nārāyaṇa who is being spoken of. So thus, here, that cause of all causes, that supreme cause, is personalized in the form of not Bill, not Jane, not any other name, but very, very specifically, as Nārāyaṇa. So that supreme cause of all causes, Nārāyaṇa, and this part is important, is situated in his own abode in the spiritual world, but nonetheless he controls the entire cosmic manifestation. Even though that's not the end of the sentence, we're going to stop there for a moment, because that is a complete thought, philosophically speaking. And I want to speak about this clause of this sentence, because it's actually very, very important in understanding what is indeed the nature of God and the relationship of God to God's creation. So, for people who have read my books in the past, for individuals who have read especially Sanatana Dharma, the Eternal Natural Way, but really all of my books, because inevitably in all of my books I mention this, as well as in many of my philosophical lectures. Sanatana Dharma does indeed have a philosophical, theological position. Individuals who don't know this, or who think that Sanatana Dharma or the Vedic tradition is somehow a philosophical free-for-all, got their information from Wikipedia instead of proper sources, instead of authentic traditional sources. Anyone who thinks that, oh yes, if you follow Sanatana Dharma, there are many different points of view as far as what is the ultimate philosophical / theological position of Sanatana Dharma. Individuals who think such a thing did not derive that opinion from having actually read the Vedic scriptures. They got this either from a more, let's say, academic pursuit. They got this from again, Wikipedia or the internet, or they heard this from someone who heard this from someone who heard this from someone, even possibly for generations. However, it is not true. Sanatana Dharma, the Vedic tradition, has a philosophical / theological position. And this is known technically as monotheistic panentheism. Not pantheism, but panentheism. And please feel free to look up that word if you have not seen this before. I'm the first person in writing and anywhere, actually, to my knowledge, to have actually declared this, that this is the philosophical/theological position of Sanatana Dharma. And with my now having said this, no one actually really disagrees with me. And let me explain what is meant by panentheism. And this verse is explaining panentheism perfectly, this clause very specifically. The idea of panentheism is the idea that God is, on the one hand, fully transcendent in his essential being. That is, God at no point is touched by nor affected by materiality, the material world, material nature, illusion, etc. God is never touched by or affected by anything that is inferior to God. That is the nature of God. In other words, God in his essence is fully transcendent. On the one hand. Now, this is where this term panentheism comes into play. On the other hand, even though God is fully transcendent, at the same time, God is also immanent within all of creation. God is immanent. In other words, God is present within all things. Indeed, there is nothing that exists that can exist unless God were there, present within it. So, thus, God both transcends materiality while at the same time interpenetrates all of reality. In other words, God is that transcendent being who ultimately is in the spiritual realm, but God is also here. God chooses also by his presence to be here within the material world. So thus, there is no atom of existence. You can look at the smallest unit of materiality. You can look at the smallest unit of materiality, what in Sanskrit is called anu, what in Western philosophy sometimes is called the monad. That is that thing which is indivisible because it is literally the smallest element of materiality. And if you had the perception, the spiritual perception to see, when you looked within even the smallest atom, what you would find would be God there within every single atom, upholding its very existence. So thus, God is literally everywhere. So this is what this verse is explaining, is indeed what I call, and I did not invent this term, this is a theological term actually, but what I have called panentheism. So let's just look at this one more time. So Nārāyaṇa is situated in his own abode in the spiritual world, thus the transcendent element of God, but nonetheless, he controls the entire cosmic manifestation. So nonetheless, he is also immanently involved within materiality as well and present within all things. So again, panentheism. Now let's go on and finish this one sentence. Now, how does he do this? According to the three modes of material nature. And then those three modes are spelled out. Sattva, raja, and tamo-guṇa. And I won't go very deeply into explaining these three things because A, I have many times in the past. B, if a person is in any way seriously conversant with Vedic spirituality, they probably know these terms quite well. But still, just as a very brief explanation for those individuals who have never encountered these three terms. These three elements are the three modes of prakriti, of material nature. So thus, everything that we perceive around us within this material realm is comprised of prakriti, of material nature. Material nature, in turn, can be seen in these three modes. Sattva is the most important of these, and this is the one that we are meant to cultivate personally as yogis and as spiritual people. Sattva is that mode of material nature. And when I say mode of material nature, this includes mind, intellect, emotions, etc. It includes everything, not just literally materiality, not just gross materiality. Sattva is of the nature of goodness, of the nature of purity, of the nature of light, of the nature of the intellectual, of the nature of health, etc., etc., etc. Rajo-guṇa, on the other hand, is of the nature of passion, of motion, of that which is action-oriented, energetic, passionate, etc. And then finally, tamo-guṇa is the very opposite of sattva-guṇa. It is of the nature of ignorance, of that which is enervating in nature, that which falls apart, that which is dull, that which is ignorant, etc., etc. So these are the three modes that we find everywhere, wherever there is materiality. So thus, each one of us as individuals, even, we tend to operate in accordance with who we are, in accordance with one of these gunas. So some of us tend to be more sattvic, that is, more spiritual, more pure, etc. Some individuals, and think of people some people tend to be very fiery, very passionate, etc. Not a lot of control over themselves. And then some people tend to be indeed tamasic, what is called tamasic, of the nature of tamo-guṇa. That is, they tend to be individuals who are dull, who are not very intelligent, who are just kind of dullards, as I call them. Individuals who, again, are not very pure people, individuals whose interests are not very sophisticated, etc., etc. So this is what is being spoken of here. Now let's go on a little bit more to the next sentence. In this way, all living entities, that is, all Atmans who are within the material world, all living entities are awarded different qualities. Let's stop there. I just explained what is meant by this. We'll see that individual human beings, really all living beings, but let's deal with human beings because that's something that we can personally relate to, being humans. Individual human beings have different qualities. Indeed, people are not the same. This idea that people are all exactly the same is not only a very modern idea, it's a very simplistic idea. It's a radically non-philosophical idea. It's an idea, unfortunately, that has gained a tremendous prominence in modernity, but at the same time, that robs us of the richness, of the depth of human beings. The truth of the matter is people are not the same. We all have different qualities. Do we share a few of the same qualities? Yes, the more uninteresting ones. The more uninteresting ones for people who say that, oh, humans are all humans. We're all just humans. Well, those qualities that humans share tend to be the least important qualities. Well, we have two eyes, we have a head, we have opposable thumbs, we walk upright on two legs, etc., etc. In other words, they tend to be the basest of qualities that we can think of. But then when it comes to the deeper spiritual qualities, intellectual qualities, qualities as far as aesthetic taste, and on, all the subtle things, people are all radically different from one another. So thus, again, there are these different qualities that an individual will have in accordance with their guna, in accordance with whether they are sattvic, rajasic, or tamasic. Now let's go on. They have different names. And in this case, Prabhupada chooses to also have in parentheses such as brāhmaṇa, kṣatriya, and vaiśya. This is indeed true. Name in two senses. First of all, indeed, we all have our individual names. In fact, for that matter, the concept of nama, the phenomenon of nama, what's called nama, that is each individual thing having its own name. We see that that is the case individually, but then also, of course, it is indeed true that people will fall into one or another of these psychophysical natures. That is, they're either brāhmaṇa or kṣatriya or vaiśya or a shudra in accordance with their gunas. So this is what is being said here. Let's go on a little bit more. So they are also awarded different duties according to the varṇāśrama institution. So this also is quite true. And also I should mention, there's a lot going on here. And I always have to weigh in my mind as I'm giving these talks, how deep should I go? What should I note? What should I mention for people to take note of, etc. You'll see that these are progressively causal in nature, this list that is here. So people will have different qualities. They'll have different gunas. As a result of that, they will have different names, meaning they will be either brahminical, they'll be kṣatriya, vaiśya, shudra, etc. As a result of that, now they will have different duties in accordance with whether they are brāhmaṇa, kṣatriya, etc. And what are those duties? We don't want to go too deeply, because just talking about the varna and ashrama system alone could take an hour. And in fact, at some point in the future, just to refresh everyone's memory, maybe as a live stream talk, I'll do that. Just for maybe half an hour, I'll just talk about the varna system. But essentially, in accordance with what is your varna, that is, whether you're a brāhmana, kṣatriya, etc., you'll have your individual duties as a person. And now, again, causally, also, there will be different forms. In other words, people indeed have different physical characteristics. Their form, quite literally, will look different in accordance with their varna and the duties that they perform. This is something that I haven't spoken about very much, but which at the same time is understood to be one of the important morphological elements of varna as it affects individual human beings. That is, a brahmana will look a certain way. Their form will look like they are a brahmana. They will look like they are sattvic. They will look very pure. There will be light coming from their eyes, etc., etc. A kṣatriya will look, very big, very muscular. The form goes along with what is the actual psychophysical nature of the individual. So that is what is being said here. And then finally, the very last sentence that is here, thus Nārāyaṇa is the cause of the entire cosmic manifestation. So ending this, in a way, kind of like bookends, ending this verse kind of in the same way that it began, but also for emphasis as well. That Nārāyaṇa, with all of this understanding of what was said previously in the rest of this verse, what this verse is doing is reiterating this. Now, understanding this, please understand now, Nārāyaṇa, as you can see, is indeed the cause of the entire cosmic manifestation. So thus, what is this verse saying? Again, it's re-emphasizing this very important point. And truthfully, it's saying it in a very unambiguous way. Nārāyaṇa is God. Nārāyaṇa is God. This is what the verse is saying. This is what the totality of the Vedic scriptures also tell us, that Nārāyaṇa is the Supreme Being. And it doesn't matter really which name of Nārāyaṇa you use, because there are thousands. There are really an unlimited number of names of Srimad Nārāyaṇa. But it is to be understood, not this person, not that person, definitely not you, and definitely not me, but Nārāyaṇa is the cause of the entire cosmic manifestation. So thus making this clear, as indeed all the Vedic scriptures do. So, with that, as you can probably tell, I tried to go through this verse a little bit quickly. There is really a lot more to say here. And if people do indeed have questions about the verse very specifically, let me just signal to everyone, now is the time. Please feel free to ask your questions. And as always, it doesn't have to be about this verse specifically, but please feel free to ask your questions about Sanatana Dharma, very specifically. And with that, I'll begin to look at these questions. And give me a moment, please. I'm just looking for these questions. Hmm. Here is a good question actually from Sri Ram. Namaste Acharyaji, does the Turu mantra, that is Om Namo Nārāyaṇaya, this is one of the names of this mantra, does the Turu mantra address both Sri Lakshmi Devi and Nārāyaṇa, or does it only address the masculine part of God? Let me say that is an excellent question. Very, very good question, actually. And I'm going to give you the answer that has never been, to my knowledge, uttered, but it is the answer to this question. No, indeed, the Tiru mantra is not addressing only the masculine aspect of God. Some people make that mistake. So thus, there are Lakshmi mantras, for example, where it's obvious that Lakshmi is being addressed. That is the feminine aspect of God. That is the Shakti versus the Shaktiman. And some people will thus necessarily make the mistake of thinking that since Lakshmi Devi is not overtly addressed in the Tiru mantra, well, then therefore this mantra must be addressing exclusively the masculine aspect of God. And this is actually not the case. Lakshmi is considered to be present also in the Tiru mantra, even though she's not overtly present there. In other words, she's not mentioned by name. And this is the case for several reasons. First of all, it has been explained in the scriptures several times that wherever there is Nārāyaṇa, automatically Lakshmi is there as well. There is no separation between Lakshmi and Nārāyaṇa. So thus, truthfully, even when one is saying a Lakshmi mantra, Nārāyaṇa is present there, even if he's not, if his name is not stated. But then conversely as well, even though in the Om Namo Nārāyaṇaya mantra, Lakshmi is not overtly mentioned, she is known to be inseparable from Nārāyaṇa. That's the first thing. The second thing is this, and now this part, the part I just mentioned, people, I believe, have heard that before, but this part people have not heard before, what I'm about to mention now. And that is, these mantras are eternal. That's understood, that these mantras are eternal. This being the case, it has to be understood that these mantras being eternal, they pre-exist anything that exists outside of Sriman Nārāyaṇa. This being the case, the very first utterance of this very phrase itself, Om Namo Nārāyaṇaya, what is being said in English translation? One is saying, I offer my respectful and humble obeisances unto that Absolute who is the sustainer of all beings. Now, this is, of course, the question. This mantra being eternal and being non-distinct from the inner nature of God, who is the first being who utters this mantra and utters it throughout eternity? That is Lakshmi Devi. So Lakshmi is the very speaker, the very first speaker of this mantra. So that's the more metaphysical aspect, and that's the more metaphysical answer. So thus, yes, Lakshmi Devi is present within the Tiru mantra as well. So I hope that answers that question. Very nice. Here's another question. I recently had an important dream involving Varaha and Narasimha, and I always have important dreams after big sacrifices to Odin. Is this the divine contacting me? How do I interpret such dreams? Very nice. Let me tell you, such dreams are truly of significance. When an individual has dreams either of the Guru, A, or B, of God or the gods, they are of significance. Now, as far as, let's say, interpreting such dreams, understanding the deeper meaning of such dreams, etc., that can only be done with a little bit of effort. A, you need guidance in interpreting these dreams. Thus, of course, this is why it's important to have a guru. It's important to have a spiritual advisor, somebody who can help to interpret these dreams. Very often, however, even with such dreams, sometimes it's a little bit difficult to understand without the guidance of a guru exactly what is being communicated, unless it's something that's very straightforward. But without going much deeper than that, let me just say that, yes, these are dreams of significance. So I would definitely take them quite seriously. Very good. Here's a very good question. I read in your book, The Vedic Way of Knowing God, that you reject the Aryan invasion theory. Do you think that the Aryans arose in India or that they moved into the region before any other peoples? Very good. Well, the truth of the matter is the vast majority of people today reject the Aryan invasion theory. It's a very outdated theory. Even in academia, actually, what to speak of individuals who, for example, would call themselves Hindu nationalists or people who are more spiritually oriented. Even in academia, and I know this very well because this was my field, I earned a PhD from the Department of South Asian Studies at University of Wisconsin-Madison. Scholars don't accept the Aryan invasion theory. Some scholars accept one form or another of what is called the Aryan migration theory. Some people don't even accept that anymore. No, the Aryan invasion theory is debunked for many, many reasons that I just don't have time to go into. Look at the writings of Dr. David Frawley, several other individuals who have written about this and have provided very clear-cut evidence. There is no Aryan invasion theory. Never happened. Zero evidence, actually, of that. As far as the origination of the Arya, it is a less important question to ask from whence did they originate, whether they originated in India and you have an out of India theory, or the opposite, that they came to India. Rather, what is of importance to understand is what is meant by the very term Arya itself. The term Arya means an individual who is noble, and nobility does not arise from a county or a nation or one specific place. You can't point to a place on a globe, oh, that's where nobility started. Wherever there are individuals who follow Dharma and who live an honorable life and who try to live noble lives, those are by definition Arya. So if you really want the actual answer to this, the Arya sphere of influence in the past, let's say, just to pick an arbitrary time, roughly 5,000 years ago, extended from Ireland, yes, all the way to India, and probably beyond that as well, and everything in between. And what you will find is that regardless of the geographic location or the ethnicity of the individual in question, some people of any ethnicity may be noble and some may be ignoble, the opposite. So yes, it's a very, very, very tricky question. And the question of where did the quote-unquote Arya people originate from is, and forgive me for saying this, I'm not saying this about you. I've heard this question 1,000 times, and I've always considered it to be a somewhat childish question, a pseudo-academic question. Again, an individual who is following Dharma perfectly and who is noble is Arya, period. That's the Vedic understanding, and honestly, that was the understanding of all ancient peoples. So I hope that answers the question. Very good. Very good. Let me answer this very quickly. Actually, Namaste, Sri Acharyaji. I was in an abusive relationship with someone who used Hinduism to fuel his own ego. I would like to move past the negative associations this gave me with the religion. Any tips? Yes, absolutely. First of all, yes, this is something that, again, if you've watched my videos for some time, and I suggest that you please do, and actually not just you, I would suggest to everyone watching this, both right now, but also who will see the recording of this, please watch all the videos. Please don't make the mistake of just kind of tuning in for the live streams that are live. Go to the older videos, watch them all, because what you'll see is that they are not time or history dependent. The videos that came out 12 years ago are just as important as videos that are going to come out 12 years from now. So one thing that you'll see is, this is one of my themes that I speak about, that sadly, the very last and subtlest trap of ego, of false ego, is religion and spirituality, so-called spirituality. This is why I've said again and again, sadly, and I'm always very honest and blunt about this, as I am about everything. A true guru is honest. And this is the fact. That unfortunately, when you look at so-called religious and even so-called spiritual people, if you're lucky, you will find the most wonderful people on the face of the earth, whose association you should crave with all of your being. And conversely, you'll find some of the worst people upon the face of the earth. Some of the most manipulative, pretentious, egotistical, patronizing people on the face of the earth, and indeed, even abusive individuals. So the reason why this is the case is indeed religion, and this is true generally. It doesn't matter what the religion is. It doesn't matter if it's so-called Hinduism or Christianity or Buddhism or anything. Religion and spirituality tends to be the subtlest entrapment of ego. And why is this the case? Well, how do we build our ego? We build our ego by thinking that we are great, that I am better than everyone else. Well, what greater fuel is there for ego than for a person to think that they understand and are somehow experiencing and grasping spiritual truth better than anyone? You see, if a person thinks that about themselves, their ego is going to run rampant, more so than if they had money, if they had fame, if they had anything. So thus, this is why spirituality is not something to be toyed with. Spirituality is not something to be played with, which is another one of my themes that I've said 1,000 times. But rather, we have to understand that if we are on the spiritual path, indeed, we need to be very careful. This is why we need a guru. This is why we need someone outside of ourselves to temper what we are doing and what we think we are doing, what we think we know, etc., to temper that with wisdom. So, yes, it's very, very sad that this person was abusive toward you. Please understand that it has nothing to do with whatever his specific religion was. Had to do with him, had to do with the fact that that individual, and yeah, I don't know if this was a man or a woman, but I'll just say him just to make it easy. It has to do with that individual person. He decided to use religion to boost his ego and to thus be abusive toward others. That was his individual choice. It had nothing to do with any religion whatsoever. And as far as tips, yes, let me please tell you this. Because we are burnt by something once doesn't mean that we should lose faith in it. You know, and we know this is the case with so many other things. Because we've had a bad, let's say, romantic relationship, that doesn't mean that there isn't someone out there for us. Because we've encountered some corrupt politician, that doesn't mean that there isn't some political leader out there who is nothing but self-sacrificing and wants to save his people, and on and on and on. In any given sector where faith is involved, yes, it is definitely possible that we can be abused. However, the very fact that we were abused does not mean that there aren't sincere individuals who are out there. Doesn't mean that there isn't some politician who they're running for office for all the right reasons and they really mean what they say. It doesn't mean that there isn't some person out there who is meant for us and who we will, if we have faith, who we will meet and have a beautiful relationship with that person. In the same way, this is the case for religion as well. because you were hurt by an individual who was falsely claiming that they were following, and you used the word Hinduism. We don't follow Hinduism. We're not Hindus. We follow Sanatana Dharma, which is the actual real name for what now is called Hinduism. Because this person abused you and they claimed that they were following that religion, please don't think that there aren't sincere individuals out there who are following it and following it very well. There are. There are indeed. So what I would say to you is please don't give up. Never give up on anything that is of importance. And when it comes to your relationship with God, very specifically, please don't give up in the idea, in the fact that there are good people out there who are spiritual people. And you will find them. If anything, please use the fact that you were in this abusive relationship with this person to know what to not look for now. Look for the opposite. And what you'll see is that there are many good people who are out there who are following the path specifically of Sanatana Dharma. So I hope that was helpful. Very good. Zarni, I see your message. You will be contacted. Again, this is something else that can be answered pretty quickly. Namaste Acharya. Buddhist monks are known to eat only one meal a day for health purposes. Did this practice originate with the Buddha, or does it have earlier Vedic origins? It has earlier Vedic origins. Indeed, everything that the Buddha did had earlier Vedic origins. The Buddha did and said nothing original, as he himself would tell you. And when it comes to the idea of having a vow of eating once a day, yeah, that's something that is actually a yogic practice. Not all yogis do it, but yogis have done it since time immemorial. It's one of the tapasyas. There are many, many different what are called tapasyas. Tapasya vrata, a vow of austerity, a vow of penance that yogis can take, and this is certainly one of them. Indeed, I was very close to one devotee yogi in New York who for a period of a year did this actually, would just have one meal a day and that's it. So yes, it's not something that the Buddha originated. It's actually Vedic. The Buddha didn't originate anything. Very good. Good question here. Namaste, Sri Acharyaji. Do the gods still watch over and interact with our world, or have they departed since the start of the Kali Yuga? Do they see our plight and assist in battle against demonic forces? Very good question. The gods are still very, very much involved in our world. They still are very much concerned with us, with our well-being, etc. And there has indeed been a somewhat of a disconnect between ourselves and the gods since the commencement of the Kali Yuga. However, that has not been as a result of them, that has been as a result of us. So we have cut ourselves off from the gods. And as far as details, that would take too long to go into. But yes, we have stopped doing sacrifices to the gods. We have stopped acknowledging the gods. We have stopped being virtuous. We have stopped having kings upon the earth who are like living manifestations of Dharma. Because when that is the case, the gods themselves come and visit such kings, etc. So for many, many reasons, we, due to our actions and our current degeneracy, we have cut ourselves off from the gods. Despite that, The gods are there. The gods certainly are still there. They're responsible for everything. They're responsible for all of the beneficent conditions in our world. They're responsible for the crops growing. They're responsible for the rains. They're responsible for the sunshine, etc., etc. They are responsible for much of the maintenance that happens in this universe. But then also, to answer the second question that you ask here, they see our plight, and they do indeed assist in battling demonic forces whenever they can. This is something I can actually go extremely deeply into, but as always, due to time, I don't want to go too deeply into this. But let me just say that there has indeed been an ongoing war between good and evil, between the Daivika and the Asurika, between those beings who are godly and those beings who are Luciferian and demonic. This war has been going on for a very long time. It's been happening on our planet, in our world, for multiple thousands of years, most of which has gone unnoticed. But it's a war that's cosmic in significance, and the gods also do everything that they can to defeat evil and evil beings in their own realms, but they also try to assist us whenever they can as well. So I hope that answers the question. I'm going to answer this question. Namaste, Acharyaji. Why is there so much conflict between various factions of Dharma? For example, Vedantins and Vaishnavas. You mean Advaitins and Vaishnavas, because Vaishnavas are Vedantists also. Shouldn't there be more effort put in to work together to fight common enemies? Very good. First of all, there are no factions in Dharma. You're talking about modern Hinduism. And you're talking about modern Indian Hinduism, which has nothing to do with what we talk about on this channel. There are no conflicts in Sanatana Dharma. If you look at the actual Vedic scriptures, the Vedic scriptures present a unified worldview, one truth, one supreme being. And many of these conflicts that you're talking about are conflicts that are more recent, meaning approximately the last 1,500 years or so. And of course, as time has progressed, now that we come to our current era, this mess that we call Hinduism now consists of thousands and thousands of different sects, many of who are not really following the Vedic scriptures very well at all. And then you ask here, shouldn't there be more effort put in to work together to fight a common enemy? That's a political, not a spiritual question. The truth is, all that you need to fight untruth, to fight the demonic, is truth itself. You need Dharma. And truthfully, if you have even one powerful human being who is following Dharma perfectly, that person has the ability to defeat all of the evil upon this earth, more so than if you were to bring together an army of individuals who are half following Dharma. So it's not a matter of numbers. It's not a matter of a so-called unity between people who are not united in truth. Rather, it is indeed Dharma itself, a full understanding of Dharma, and following the leadership of an individual who is personifying in all of his actions Dharma. And that person leading the way, that and that alone will defeat the enemies of Dharma. So I hope that answers that question. Very good. We have about another minute left. I just want to see if I can answer another question in a minute or so. What are the current take on the recent news of the Galactic Federation? The Galactic Federation is the silliest New Age garbage humanly conceivable. We don't follow any so-called Galactic Federation. That's one step below Star Trek. So please stop thinking about galactic federations. There is no galactic federation. That's New Age. I'll try to find a good question. So give me a moment, please. How should I pray to God? How should I pray to God? Very good. This will maybe be the last question that I will answer, and this is a good question. With absolute sincerity. With absolute sincerity and in your own words. You should pray to God in a very heartfelt sort of way. You should pray to God as if God is your very best friend and that this is who you're speaking to. You should pray to God not in the sense of awe and reverence and that God is some very distant being who you have to fear, but rather you should pray to God with great love, with great devotion. And what you should pray for primarily are those things that are the greatest and the most important things. That is, you should pray to God that He allow you to serve Him. Other things are secondary, and truthfully, it's good to pray to God about everything and anything. If you have a very legitimate need, there's nothing wrong with turning to God. If you are ill, if you have a family member who's ill, if you truly are in absolute poverty and, you need some relief, if you truly need something like this, it's always good to pray to God. But of all things, it is especially wonderful to pray to God for increased devotion and that we may serve God perfectly with great devotion. So in other words, to pray to surrender to God, to pray in such a way that you are praising God with great devotion. That's the greatest prayer that you can do. You certainly can use formulaic prayers. There are many formulaic prayers, in fact, that are there in the Vedic scriptures. But more important is to pray to God in a very heartfelt sort of way. Don't look for perfect wording. Don't look to be eloquent and poetic as if you're writing some sort of epic literature. But rather, just pray to God in your own words with absolute sincerity. And I guarantee that whatever prayer you say to God, God hears. God hears. And just have faith that that is the case. Very good. Well, due to time, I think that we're going to have to stop here. I know there are many more questions, and unfortunately, I won't have time to answer any more. And as always, I apologize for this, but again, we do this every single Monday. Please feel free to come back next Monday, and you can certainly try to ask your questions again, and hopefully I'll see them and I will choose to answer them. And with that, again, thank you all very much for being here. Just a few very quick reminders. First, if you have not already done so, please subscribe to this channel. Our goal is indeed to make this channel into a very, very big one. That can only be the case with your help. First of all, by you yourself subscribing, but also by telling other people about our channel. This is something that people often ask. How can they do seva? How can they do service? How can they do something important and good in order to help Dharma, to help this cause? Well, this is one way in which you can help that's pretty easy. If you can't give a donation, well, this is something that you can do. That is, spread the link to this channel. Spread the link to all these videos. Tell people about us, please. Please tell others. Anywhere on social media, anywhere where you are, where you have a voice. Go there, tell people about this Dharma Nation channel, and have them subscribe. The other thing is, I should also mention, we also have a BitChute channel, and we're trying to have that grow as much as possible as well. If you look in the description to this video, you'll see a bunch of links, social media links. You'll see our BitChute channel. It's called Sanatana Dharma. We recently changed the name, actually. So it's very simply the Sanatana Dharma channel on BitChute. It's Sanatana_Dharma, but we are the Sanatana Dharma channel on BitChute. Please subscribe there as well, something that's very, very important. BitChute is a platform that is growing enormously and very rapidly. So we very much want to grow our channel on there. So please do that when you have a chance. The other thing, please like this video because it helps with the algorithms. The more likes there are on the video, the more of a chance that the video will be suggested to other people and therefore they can see it. So this message that you heard today, If we have a lot of likes, then other people will have an opportunity to have this video suggested to them. So please like this video when you can. Visit dharmacentral.com whenever you can. That's our main website. When you're there, you'll see our books that are available. And we have quite a few books. You'll see that we have a mantra meditation CD that's available. You'll see that also you can become an official tithing member of the International Sanatana Dharma Society. If you can, please do so. Please become an actual contributing member of the International Sanatana Dharma Society. That is something that helps us tremendously with all the many dozens of projects that we are engaged in to bring Dharma to the world. And then finally, also when you're at dharmacentral.com, please join our email list as soon as you can. And in that way, in case anything happens with whatever platform, we can always remain in touch. So with that, again, I thank you all very much for being here. We will see you again, God willing, next Monday, same time, 7 p.m. Central Time. We do this every single week. And in the meantime, I ask you all to please take very good care of yourselves. We're living in a very, very special time. This is a very special era in which the end result of all the chaos and the craziness that we're seeing around us is ultimately going to be good. Believe me, ultimately, what we're going to experience is going to be something wonderful. But in between now and then, anything can happen. And the world, I think, will continue to get a little bit more chaotic and crazy. So please, as I always tell you, take very good care of yourselves in every way that you can, so that we can continue to do this every week for many years to come. And with that, namaste. Please take care. Jaya Srimad Nārāyaṇa. Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna. Jaya Shri Guru. Sanatana Dharma Jayate. Dharma-rāśrama Jayate. Victory to Sanatana Dharma and victory to the eternal Dharma nation. Until next we meet.